What is it?
Oh, did you?
That was my project. So every time I go out.
It means a lot.
Oh, you're way down there. Right before my two.
They got it, I think it's painted now though.
Oh, yeah. So hopefully most of these don't.
Looks better, yes. But yeah,
This
my
one's
wall is
different
gone
than the
now. It was the
regular
one by
committee.
Wendy's, where
Usually-
they had all the hot air balloons
see.
back in the, yeah.
I
they're
say
gone.
that, but then.
Arby's, yeah. Arby's.
Aw.
That really.
She probably got your favorite
Mrs.
food too, huh?
Newhouser.
All right. Call to order the Ravenna City Council Committee of the Whole meeting for Monday, October 23rd at 6 p.m. The first item on the agenda is approval of Committee of the Whole meeting minutes from September 18th. Were there any additions or corrections to those? Hearing none, do we have a motion to accept as submitted?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yeah, for now, we're going to skip number 2 on the agenda and move to number 3, which is an ordinance authorizing the purchase of 4 solar speed limit signs and to appropriate $15,240. This is streets and sidewalks.
Yeah, we discussed it. Mr. Finney kind of explained his idea and be able to move them around the community as needed. If there's any other questions or concerns with those?
Yes, I was just wanting to ask again, will these be used simultaneously back to back, or will they be all rotated? Who is going to be responsible for the upkeep of these? Exactly where will they be stored?
I don't think the idea is to store them. I think the idea is to have them out and being used.
So they'll be out all the time, continuously?
But we never decided who was gonna be responsible, to monitor these, correct?
Yeah, I'm hoping the police department will have involvement.
But we don't
Choose
have that
locations.
Yeah, that's-
initially in writing at this point.
No.
So do we think we should spend that 15,000 now? Is it something we should act on, seeing that we have some other items coming up that might need fixed?
And since
Is that
we
something
have
should
some
hold off on?
unanswered questions there,
I think that we should move forward with it, so we can allow the street department, we talked about making, being able to move them, to allow them time to be able to set that up so it could be successful. It's certainly something that we talk about almost every other month about speed in the city, whether it's Highland or Diamond or
But
wherever
we don't know
it
who's
is.
gonna monitor them at this point.
yes.
Well, the units will collect data. How we use the data, I don't know, is as important as just getting presence of speed. We have one speed trailer that they use. And now we would have 4 plus 1 makes 5, and again, the intent is to move them around the city. Again, whether we collect data or not, if we want to collect data, it's there to download the data. Be it the police department, engineering department, obviously street department would be involved in relocating.
Was the police
If
department okay
necessary.
with purchasing
Oh,
this?
absolutely.
And is this something that could come out of their funds too, instead of the general fund, all of it?
Well, yeah, that's, would be up to Brian if he sees that best. I don't
just
think
question
they
it
should
all
come out of.
coming out of general fund.
Well, I know the general fund is doing well right now.
It
I
is.
agree, but we need to keep it that way because if we're looking to some of our future projects with the municipal complex and things like that, I'd like to see the general fund maintain that positivity so that we can get there. I do agree with the capital improvement funds that some of the different departments get, that if this could come out of capital improvements, I would like to see that.
I'm a complete opposite. I'm in favor of moving forward with this, and we've talked about this in the past and heard from residents that if this is more of an awareness thing, if Streets and Sidewalks is taking care of it, it is $15,000 in terms of a $27 million budget that we have, then I think this is something we should move forward with. I understand the disconnect between Bob and the chief, and I talked to Police Chief Wallace about this. He has not only the speed trailer that he has, he's got 2 additional units that are not, blinking signs, but bringing awareness around some of those streets that we're talking about, we get the complaints about. I think it's a good thing if Streets and Sidewalk, or Street Department is going to take the lead in terms of putting them up, taking them down, or moving them, then it's the police department, if this is Bluetooth, and we're deciding how we're using the data, and correct me if I'm wrong, but They just need to get within range to download the data. So then it's just a question of how it's going to be used. But in terms of everyday driving around the city, you know, if it's Highland, Freedom, whatever it is, we've talked about it.
I'm not disagreeing with the need for, I'm not disagreeing with the need for them. I'm disagreeing with, I feel like this is more of a police capital improvement rather than a general fund.
Well, then can we?
That's the only
Yeah.
question I have, is where the fund should come from.
So if you're comfortable with the idea of it, we can have a conversation of where that's coming from before the November meeting.
Okay.
Would you be comfortable with that?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. And if we can come up with an equal split, we can have that conversation.
There was 2 questions that was asked last meeting. One, will they hold their price? And I said yes, they said yes, they will hold their price. Then the second was it's a 2-year warranty.
It was, okay. Thank you.
And Brian, can we just start a thread, an email thread between you, Bob, and the police chief to iron that out where?
As far as where the funds come
Yes.
from?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, whether it be engineering, whether it be police department, they're all from the general fund anyway. Now, the one difference would be the street department has their own funding, or you could look at the capital fund too. Those are all choices. The capital fund right now is a little more strained than the general fund is, I would say that.
Okay.
Just because we had a lot of projects over the last couple of years, so it's not in horrible shape, but it definitely got hit pretty hard the last couple of years. But, I mean, either way, I mean, 15,000 would not make or break either fund, so it could go either way.
Okay. If there's no other questions, and if we're comfortable moving this forward, what's the pleasure of the committee?
Ordinance.
Number 4 on the agenda is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to hire a GPD group and appropriate $5,000, also streets and sidewalks. Mr. Harper?
Yes, this was for a traffic survey for a light at King in Maine. This one I'm sure we'll have another conversation. I guess at this point, the question is the purpose of this survey is to figure out if this traffic light is warranted or not, correct? Because I
Correct.
believe in the past it's been deemed not warranted.
Correct.
So I guess the question would be to council at this time, with the proximity of the elementary school to this traffic light, is this something that council even wants to consider, having this light removed? If not, and it's not working properly, are we willing to spend the money to have it upgraded?
Why waste the $5,000 if council's not gonna vote for it? I can't speak, I know I'm not supporting it, I didn't support it back in 2015, I know current administration didn't support it. I also know that being in a school zone, a traffic study is not warranted. And I think you quoted probably high at the point of the light, of the cost of the repair. I think that maybe if you came back with some other numbers, maybe it might be a little different if you were actually quoting it. But to me, a child's life is priceless. I sat and I watched myself personally, and there are a lot of children that do walk and use that. They also use it off weekdays too, during school time. They use it to cross to go to Family Dollar, because there's a lot of kids that live in poverty in that area that go and shop at Family Dollar for milk. And, you know, I see them carrying groceries. The other thing is that, you know, that also helps to control the speed as well. It does break the speed barrier down some. So whether you just use that as the blinking hazard caution when it's not being used during the school week, but to have that option for the crosswalk, I think is imperative. And you just said there's a lot of money in the general fund. So if it means that we have to fix that light, I think it's important that we fix that light. And I think that $5,000 is not needed to spend. That's mine.
Any
I
other
c-
questions?
Well, I can agree with that, because there are a lot of people that use that just in crossing the street outside of school hours.
It wasn't my intent to remove the school crossing. There would be some form of school crossing light at Main Street. A pedestrian crossing, a lit pedestrian crossing at Main Street would stay there specifically for the school. we will have to remove the existing infrastructure when we widen the road, put up new infrastructure. I'm basing that price on what we just saw at Cleveland, Highland, and Sycamore at $150,000. Maybe it'll be a little bit cheaper. And I took the less expensive route at that intersection because I put span wire poles instead of mast arms. Those were another, I think, $20,000, and I didn't want to spend that money. So I have no problem putting a traffic signal up. Just understand that it's going to be, there's a price tag associated with
I
it.
mean, we have one at Riddle, and it's still there, and that one's, you know, if you would do a traffic study there. Riddle and Myrtle.
Sure.
I mean, and
If council would like me to take it down, we would do a traffic study before we took it down,
you
and then
have to
take it down.
on some things to take it down, but
What's
to
that?
take it down, you would have to, but to warrant if it's needed when it's in a school zone, you don't have to. So I just feel, why spend the $5,000?
So there's multiple warrant items. For instance, pedestrian is one of them. The amount of pedestrians, amount of traffic, sight distance, the curvature of the road, hills of the road. There's different reasons why proximity to certain businesses could warrant. So it's not just pedestrian. But in the past, it wasn't warranted, but that analysis would be outdated today. So again, if we're going to take that down, then we need to do a warrant analysis. If we're not going to take it down, I agree, we don't have to. But again, it won't be next year. It will probably 24. I'll come back to council when we have our design for widening that section. I'll come back to council to appropriate the money and a design for that traffic signal.
So at this point, that traffic signal would be appropriate, but when the widening begins, you would recommend we
It
go
has to
with-
be relocated. It's in the way. It would be in the
Well-
street, so it would have to be relocated.
Would that be a time to remove that existing, those existing lights and put up the newer style that's compatible with everything else?
Yes. Yeah. So last year, it took almost 50 weeks to get the power poles that we utilized at Sycamore. So I need to be ahead of the game so I don't hold the widening project up, which would be anticipated 2025,
You
calendar year 2025.
think there's still a backlog on some of those items? Possibly?
I-
Don't know.
Maybe it's 30 weeks instead of 50 weeks, something
Okay.
like that. I think maybe 4 of those weeks were messed up by the contractor not ordering them when they should have, but. Okay.
Does anybody else have any objections to keeping that light?
I say keep it, safer for the children.
Okay. So it sounds like this time we will not appropriate the money for that traffic survey.
All right. And then in terms of logistics, then as you widen the road, there would be another conversation about upgrading the light to match, in my mind, what's over on Cleveland, Highland, Sycamore? Okay.
Diamond
Yes.
and-
Yeah,
Correct.
okay. Okay, so we'll leave this here then. Moving on to number 5 then, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to purchase 8 bollard bike racks and appropriate $2,500. This is also streets and sidewalks.
Yeah, these racks will be placed in the downtown area for individuals that may come into town from the bike trail or just right up from the neighborhoods. They'll give them someplace safe to lock up their bikes while they visit downtown.
I haven't, I'm not against it, but I just have a question. Are there any other older bike racks that have been stored someplace within the city from the past that could be added to this, or?
In the past, this question came up. I counted 2 benches with, like, racks, so to speak, attached to the back of them. And I don't know if they still exist anymore, but that might have been 5, 6 years ago.
Those were in storage somewhere?
No, I think they were on Main Street. I
They
think
were-
one of them might have actually been in front of 1888. Again, I'm going back a few years. They seem to move around. I don't know who moves them, but they do move. They're not bolted into the concrete.
Are we seeing a lot of bike traffic from the bike trails that are coming, or are we hoping that by doing this, that people will come up?
I'm not a bicycler, I don't know. If it doesn't have an engine, I'm not interested.
There's nowhere to put
I
my
think
bike.
it-
So I don't know, Amy.
I was just
I had a
curious.
business has approached, Main Street has talked, Main Street Ravenna has talked to me about it. Popped, Gwen from Pop has talked to me about it.
And if I think we can find that connecting route from the trail into downtown and dedicate a dedicated trail, I think that traffic will improve. So,
Is there a bike lane on, up the hill to Main Street on Sycamore?
So I've striped Sherrod's on,
Okay.
which is a legal, announcing there, it's a legal, part of the Ohio Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Device showing that motorists are to share lanes with bicycles.
Same on Cleveland Road then? Is that what the
It is
same thing?
Yeah, Cleveland,
Okay,
and then it runs up to Main Street, and then from Main Street back to the bike trail.
okay.
and these racks will be attached to the,
They'll be bolted into
they'll
the
be
concrete.
bolted.
Okay.
Do we,
We have a question or a comment from,
Larry Slenius, 123 North Walnut. Just a quick question, are these racks small enough? Or can they be placed in such a way that they will not obstruct the sidewalk?
Yeah, we did talk about that briefly, and they are, I don't know if I have that picture
it's the
still.
circular,
One
But it-
post,
It's
but
a
I
smaller
agree,
style
as long as
bike
it
rack.
doesn't obstruct the pedestrian traffic, kind of inconspicuous as to not clutter the Main Street sidewalks.
Looks
One
like you
other
could
thing-
attach, what, 2 bikes to them, it looked like? Is that what they were?
And this is coming out of our Park CI, right?
There- I don't know if you
I
can
would
see
say
that.
wherever Brian wants it to come out of, I
They're
would
not
say it
real
would be
big,
more,
but they're big enough that you could attach bikes.
maybe Dennis's
2 or 3
Economic
bikes to
Development
them.
Fund or something.
We talked about keeping them out of the traffic
Chuck
flow.
Lowe. They're only a couple feet tall. They're not 18 inches in diameter, maybe 2 feet tall.
Something we may want to come up with is maybe an ordinance that if a bike shows up and it's there for a long period of time and it's not moved, what's gonna happen to that bike? Like, what, maybe, to put in down the road? How long does a bike stay? Are we going to allow a bike to stay downtown tied up for 6 months? Just say, for an example, that might be something to, act upon sooner than later, I think, too, a protocol for that.
well, at least on the bike racks, are we comfortable moving this forward?
To
Yes.
answer Larry's question, these could be put against the raised curb streetscape islands, so they're not in the way of the sidewalk. I mean, just an idea, thought. They might not be that might not be the best location, mid-block for, anyway, that's up, council can decide if you guys want to walk the street and make suggestions, that'd be great.
Could
Book
do
the
that.
date, I'll be there.
Okay.
Just pick a nice day.
Yeah.
This week.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, well, if there's no other questions on this, what's the pleasure of the committee?
ordinance.
And number 6 on the agenda is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to sign consent legislature for ODOT to crack seal. This is also streets and sidewalks, Mr. Harper.
Yeah, this is 100% funded by the state to seal some very small sections of city roads. 59 and 88?
Route 5.
Route 5, Route
A
5.
little section of Route 5 and then some of State Route 88.
Around 88.
Questions on this item? Hearing none, what's the pleasure of the committee?
Ordinance.
All right, number 7 on the agenda is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with TIC for water tank demolition. This is sponsored by Utilities. Mr. Moskin?
Yes, this is for the, referred to as water tank / standpipe out on 14, used to be called GE standpipe. One time for this to be removed and taken care of. It's been out of service for, I'll just say, several years. So this needs to be taken down. It has no practical function at the present time. So whenever company can start on this, that would be great.
We talking about the demolition itself or a plan to demolish?
The construction documents, so when we bid out the construction, and they'll bid out destruction also. Yes,
This is
So there's-
planning to demolish.
correct, yeah, this is the engineering services, plans and specs to demolish, to remove the tank, correct.
Okay, so both of them are for plans and specs.
Correct. They, for
Okay.
whatever reason, they broke it out into two separate contracts.
I guess it's conceivable we could approve one and not the other, which seems a little illogical. but-
Right.
Well, if there's no questions or any other questions,
Ordinance,
what's the pleasure of the committee?
sorry.
Yes.
Ordinance.
And then number 8, matching, is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with TIC for design and specifications, also utilities.
Okay, this would be for the new water tank that would be redone approximately, Mr. Finney, is this 750,000 gallon capacity of the new one?
I'm not 100% sure that we've settled on the size.
Okay,
700,000 has been thrown around now. It's going to partially depend on the price also.
okay, well, at least it's, I'll call it a ballpark number.
Correct. We haven't decided exactly the amount.
Okay, well, that's in the planning stage, but this still needs to go ahead that way. At least these specs can be taken care of.
Any other questions on this? Hearing none, what's the pleasure of the committee?
Ordinance.
And number 9 on the agenda is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract for backup power and appropriate $74,000. This is also utilities, Mr. Moskin.
Yeah, yes, this is,
What's the total?
74,900.
900.
900, okay. This money will come out of the wastewater fund. This would be on 88, which would be north of the hike and bike trail.
Oh, okay.
As soon as you cross the bike trail, it's in the grass. I mean, it doesn't really stand out. Since I've been affiliated with this over the years, I know exactly where it is. But the reason for it is, earlier this year, when that storm came through, the electric was out for days. And this was backed up. So along with this, there'll be a generator installed with this. This will be powered by natural gas. So as soon as the electric goes out, then this will kick in. The process will just keep up. What's in there now, no one knows the exact age, but it could be approximately 60-plus years old, maybe much longer, much older, rather. That wasn't. So this is something that really needs to be done. And then once this is finished, this is going to be good for, I'm just going to say, decades to come.
All right. I know for a while they had the fire hose pumping out the water.
Oh,
out of it,
boy,
so.
yes, that was a mess.
So is there any significance to be drawn from the fact that it's $100 under the bidding threshold?
Well, I don't, from what I understand, it's not even probably gonna reach that amount, but they just set that as a max amount, just so.
Well, but
they
that would be the reason, wouldn't
Right.
it?
But that was leaving some room for, some extras if needed type thing, but,
Okay.
Well,
yeah.
So, yeah, we're appropriating just enough that we don't
Just
have to.
enough to do that, right?
Yeah, okay, I got it.
and the reason, because it doesn't know exactly all the electrical work that'll be done, it's really close, and natural gas line, depending what's there, if something might need to be added.
Any questions from council? Hearing none, what's the pleasure of the committee?
Ordinance.
Number 10 on the agenda is an ordinance amending Chapter 214 of the codified ordinances, sponsored by planning. Mr. Karas?
So, yeah, we've resurrected Chapter 214 from our Code of Ordinances, which in the past currently says it's a policy for purchasing over $2,000. And we had discussions about that being a very low amount. So in your packets, in addition to what I included in the committee meetings, which was basically that we would set the threshold at 25,000 instead of 2,000. And that there would be the stipulation that the money would already have been budgeted, and that the finance director would have a process for certifying that the money was available. In addition, for this meeting, I added a subsection B, because council indicated that it would be helpful to have a report before our regular meetings, so council could see which contracts or purchases were made without council approval. So that's what you have in front of you, just the changes to chapter 214.
Rob, the only question I have is if it would be possible during the original budget meetings and approvals, if we could get a more detailed line item of the items that are being budgeted for that particular fund, so that we have an idea of the items that are being requested at the beginning of the budget approval process that are included in that.
Well, just so we're clear, this isn't a specific fund of any sort, this is.
Right,
okay.
I'm just saying in general, when we approve the budget,
Right.
we
Well-
have a more detailed, instead of just a general number in each line item, if we have a more detailed, like maybe what the departments are, kind of what does finance get when the departments ask for their budget?
Yeah, and I don't want to go off on a tangent, but I agree. But at least with what's in front of us, in 214, I would like to have that conversation though, Brian, and that was partially what we, I think, discussed in committee meetings was, what were the priorities of each department, so just so that we would understand that question. What are the big items that might be coming out of streets? I don't want to derail the conversation.
Yeah,
but-
I agree, we should, not get too distracted by that. I will say that I appreciate that Brian does provide us, when we talk about the budgets at various time of the year, what the items are that seem to be a little bit different than the prior years. But introducing this, though, does present another problem in that council will be seeing fewer contracts.
We need to know ahead of
Yeah.
time what we're approving.
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of input on that a little, so we have 990 expense accounts, and we have 264 revenue accounts, and within those, there's some of them hundreds of expenditures within each one, so we're talking tens of thousands of, I'm not trying to be mean, I'm just saying there's tens of thousands of expenditures, so it's really kind of hard to go line by line and do that. What I try to do when we have the budget meetings and then the meetings here, point out like big changes, so it's like, okay, they're gonna purchase this piece of equipment, or salaries are going up because of this, or we're hiring a new person here, trying to hit the major components of changes from year to year. That's what I try to do, to go over the major equipment, but I can provide any kind of reports council wants, like if they want to see, we run month-end reports, so I can provide a check listing if everybody wants to see that, or a purchase order listing, or kind of expand them. I started doing those ones like last year with just the general fund status ones. I added that to it. But we can add more reports too if you want to see, specifics. And then if you have questions, during the time, you can call the finance office. We can pull purchase orders or checks or whatever, kind of show you what it is, or, if we have to talk to the department heads. So that's kind of how we try to do it now. I can always run a more detailed report, like of past history. Like I can run any kind of report. I can look at, okay, you want to see 2022. I can look at like each line item, and you can see what makes up all those expenditures, and then, ask me with questions. I mean, I can provide those reports. I've just shown, those are really long reports. Those aren't ones you want to print out. I mean, you're talking,
Yeah.
Tens of thousands of pages.
I
but-
think a simple spreadsheet from month to month that lists, we're not talking about a trip to,
Right.
Walmart for a package of Staples.
Yeah,
and,
you get a lot of those kind of things, right?
but something that maybe requires a purchase order or some,
Yeah.
but I think the report would make it incumbent upon council to then ask questions if there
Right.
are any.
Yeah.
But I don't think about past, past years
Yeah.
for, I think that's a
But that
little
would
bit
give you,
overkill.
that would give you a good idea of what like makes up each line, so you can say, oh, okay, that, because some of them are self-explanatory, some of them not so much. Some of
Right.
them are a little more like, well, what's in that? And, you know, we struggle with how many accounts we've had. I've made a conceited effort to try to reduce the number of accounts. I think I've took off 200, 300 accounts since I've been here. But we still have almost 1,000, you know, I mean, it's still a lot. I think the last one I have here shows 990, and it's still, to me, too many, but,
I think as we head into budget time towards December, you know, we can have another conversation. I think the emails that you send out to department heads
Yeah.
that give, you know, some general information about
Yeah.
what their focus is, just cluing in council, distilling that for council, I think would be helpful in terms of
Yeah.
identifying what those big ticket items are gonna be within the budget that we might be able to follow up on. So
yeah, that's
we can have a separate conversation about that.
and there's a lot of lines, like, you know, some of it will change year to year, and that's the ones I try to point out, but there's a lot of them that stay pretty consistent from year to year, so I don't really point those out necessarily, because you know, if there's, usually the departments kind of stay pretty steady with how they operate, so you're gonna need chemicals for this plant, you're gonna need this and that. So I don't necessarily ask each department and task them with, starting with a zero-based balance budget, where they have to show me every penny they're gonna spend for the year. What I ask them for is, what do you need to change? What do we need to change? What can we reduce? What can we increase?
Okay.
And why? And so that's what I challenge them to do.
Okay.
So, and that's kind of what I share with council. I don't really go into the mundane
Right.
ones, though, so that's,
Yeah.
you know. But certainly, yeah, I can start sending some reports too, like some of the ones that we do print off on a monthly basis, and then council can kind of let me know if any of those are helpful.
Yeah.
Because we have them saved, they're actually, all the department heads have access to them. It's on our X drive. And so I can share any of those with council and see if they want to see them as well. Some of them I don't think will be very helpful, some may be helpful. You know, but I can share them all and then just kind of let me know.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Mr. Karas, B, as I'm reading it, that report would list every purchase and contract below $25,000.
Yes.
Because, so every purchase and every contract below $25,000. And that's what I think we're saying is going to be hundreds and hundreds of items.
Well, I mean, we can certainly tweak the wording. I just
Yeah.
don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
you
and-
know.
and I can share them through reports. I wouldn't recommend printing those for Chelsea to print those out because we're going to kill all the trees in the town, but, I mean, but I can certainly PDF them and send them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Something like that.
And if we're comfortable with the general scope of what this looks like, then Rob and Brian, we can have a conversation of what that report could
Yeah.
be and tweak some of the language
Yeah,
heading
and-
into the November.
and like you said, you could send some reports out, and we could say, well, you know, this is a little overkill, let's cut
Yeah.
it back. You know, I think we can tweak the report
Okay.
over time.
Sounds good.
Anything else, Rob? Any questions on this? Comfortable moving it forward? What's the pleasure of the committee?
Ordinance.
And number 11 on the agenda is approval or ordinance on, to implement the downtown wayfinding signage, also planning, Mr. Karas.
Yeah, and I guess in your packets, hopefully, tonight you received a draft policy along with the sign design that you probably saw last month, and then a form going along with the policy for initiating the process for establishing a sign on public property or city property. Not sure what to say. I think one of the questions is, because the design for these signs was sort of a competition with a group of students from Kent State University. We did go through a vetting process with the help of Main Street Ravenna. And for some reason, this design in front of you is what a lot of people kind of gravitated to. There are other designs, and if it's the will of council, we could go back and look at some of the other designs before we go too far forward with the policy. So the first question I would ask is are we okay with the designs for these different types of signs?
Well, I think, just to add, we discussed that the general outline of the policy, Rob and I, the general outline of the policy, if we wanted to change the design, the application in front of you could stay sort of looking the same. The signage would just change. So there's a couple things here. One is the policy itself and an agreement on that, and then the design of the signs. But still not losing sight of moving this forward and getting it on the November agenda.
I have seen these in other places as an example of directional, and I believe that it was very attractive and quite helpful. Just other places where I've been over the years, and that's quite an asset by itself, I believe.
I think they're very attractive. The two things that somehow I really wish we could incorporate is, more school pride in them, where it's, home of the Ravenna Ravens. And also, I'm sad that we did get rid of the balloon affair, like hot air balloon image in our community, because that is one of the longest standing things and Ravenna is known for. So if I were to critique anything, I would like to somehow see more school spirit for like community pride and maybe a traditional old hot air balloon of some sort. So that's all.
Are you comfortable with at least moving forward with the signage, the idea of the policy?
Absolutely.
And okay. I like that idea, though.
Okay, so as far as the policy goes, I mean, it's not all that complicated, and I think the form is the best way to kind of describe what the policy is designed to do. Is one, to figure out which of the 6 different signs would be requested, whether it be by somebody in council, somebody in the city, or a resident. And then the location, where on city property would this thing be located? What the sign says, which will be driven by what type of sign it is, and then, who's requesting it. We kind of talked about, well, what would be the approval process? And my idea was to kind of align this with how we've handled those banners downtown. Years ago, we established the banners where we see veterans, and we've done other things there as well. And that's done through the service director's office, right? So we decided that the approval should be by the service director, not that the city council had to decide every time a sign went up. But just for the sake of due process, if for some reason a sign was requested and not approved, then I did put in the policy the possibility that a person could appeal a negative decision by the service director in putting up a sign directly to city council. So those are the basic components of the policy. Any questions or concerns about that?
So the initial signage, though, would the service director and Bob work, would they work to establish it? Because I'm sure that we're just not going to approve one sign at a time.
So that's a good
Right.
question. My suggestion is that city council or the mayor or somebody say, well, let's get started and put a couple of gateway signs on Main Street, east and west, maybe.
So like a real basic start and add from
Yeah,
there.
but the policy is basically designed for what happens in the future after maybe some basic signs go in.
Would this be like design review be a part of it?
I didn't put any wording regarding the design review, but I don't know that the design review would have a role in city property. But I could be wrong.
About, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, they wanted gateway signs of their own. You're entering historic Ravenna, that sort of thing. If the gateway signs were specifically going to be placed at Sycamore or Linden, let's say, which there's no room at Linden, we'd have to find a creative spot to put these. then they could say, use the word historic Ravenna or historic downtown or something of that nature.
So it could be tricky, kind of.
Yeah,
But,
down there.
well, okay,
Of all
but
of
I
these
guess the
signs.
question is, do you believe the design review would have a role in deciding whether or not a sign should go in or not?
No, it's
Yeah.
city right of way, it's up to council.
Yeah, that's kind of was my approach to this.
But if, again, if the specific sign, they would enjoy having something labeled as historic Ravenna, historic downtown.
Yeah.
In some fashion. We have the little street signs
Right.
but.
I think that would be appropriate too. I mean, for the historic, I mean, we, pride ourselves on our historic district and our historic
Yeah,
buildings.
well, for
So,
example,
yeah.
the orientation type sign has a little map on it. There could be one for, the historic district outlining the boundaries of it. I mean, that's just one idea that could be floated.
I think the only suggestion I have was just removing the gateway sign from requesting. I don't know who's going to request the gateway, that big sign. I mean, I can understand the orientation directional, but that's.
Well,
that's-
I just included in,
I
everyone we
understand, I
had.
understand,
We could
yeah.
certainly peel that off, or just, preemptively always deny them. But who knows, maybe somebody comes up with a great idea for a gateway sign, and we say, okay, I don't know.
Excuse me,
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I was gonna say too, I think there's about 8, Bob, the welcome to Ravenna signs, like the entrances to the city. There's one out by Pizza Hut. There's one on 44 coming into town there before, like around the Ohio Avenue, Ravenna Avenue area. So Amy, back to your point, that might be a good place to maybe put Home of the Ravens
Yeah.
and maybe
Yeah.
some other,
Right.
Because I
like
know one out by
specific
Pizza
signs
Hut
there.
years ago, we got the state champion
Yeah, the
baseball
baseball
team,
teams,
and they
mhm.
still, I think Tim Content and Bill Brigant's son, both their boys played on that team.
The one
and-
on Diamond has that too, and.
Yeah,
I mean,
they were
there's-
hot
It's
stove.
fallen down a couple times, been on the ground, like,
Yeah.
it could
So, I
use
mean,
some
those are older signs
Yeah.
and that, so that might be something that, want to maybe take into consideration what to do with them.
That's a good
So-
idea.
The tricky part is, at least from the downtown, is finding locations for these that are visible. Trees, streetlights, whatever else is in the way. But, I think the trees, and the location of the trees, the flower beds, that's probably the biggest hindrance. We have a sign that's in front of the Cimarron pointing to the municipal parking lot, or city parking lot. People don't even know it's there, because it's hidden. It's there, it's faded, and
yeah.
it looks terrible, but it is there.
And I agree. I kind of want to stay on the surface level of locations, because I think testing out a couple locations that are high visibility in the right place, and if we take, instruction from other municipalities that are doing this, we might be able to steal some ideas. But I think, again, the idea of the signage and council being the holdup of implementing this, then we have the policy, and if everybody's comfortable with that, and at least the application, then we can at least get the ball rolling on this.
And yeah, but by the time we have our meeting in November, if it's okay to move this on, feel free to send me any suggestions for changes. If you want to take the gateway away, we'll take it out of the form.
I don't know that we need 4, big, I don't know how big those are, 6 by 8 signs. So.
Well, you see there's a
Right.
image of a guy assume it's a guy, standing next to it, so you get some sense of the scale.
And we do have the original, if anybody wants to look at I don't think it's digital, but this is the only copy, I think, of the wayfinding signage that, I don't know if Main Street did this, or who
Yes.
put this together, but the other
Well,
designs that are in there.
actually, I think the group of students at Kent State put that together,
Okay.
I think.
Let's just do some signs.
Right. Comfortable moving this forward, then? Okay. What is the pleasure of the committee, then?
Ordinance.
All right, number 12 on the agenda is an ordinance approving the creations of a tax increment financing. This is Community and Economic Development. Ms. Wood?
Yes, we have Dennis West here tonight to speak on it. A TIP is an economic development tool that is commonly used for the benefit of both the city and the businesses. Dennis?
To just give a little bit of update on the TIF, we're still looking at some language within the TIF ordinance to get a further understanding of what's going on and how we can TIF. We brought in the lawyer from Bricker and Graydon to be able to provide those answers to those questions. And right now, we're still looking to try and move this forward, hopefully before the beginning of December, because this has to get sent through to the county auditor in order to be recorded before the end of the year. So we're looking for a time. We were going to have a Zoom meeting this afternoon, but that was canceled. We'll get you guys updated on any results that come out of an email broadcast that, or a questionnaire that was sent, and the lawyer will give his updates on what he believes the right guidance is for moving forward on those.
Yeah, so, and I appreciate all the work you've done on this and appeasing my sort of questions from time to time. And I did get a copy of the ordinance. I don't know that anybody else has a copy of it yet. And it kind of answers the questions the basic questions I had were, can the improvements already made be incorporated, or does it have to be future public infrastructure improvements? I read it as the code, which is 5709.4040, that yes, anything made, I think is the word used, and that's kind of a past tense description, but somebody planted in my ear that it had to be future things. But I think the lawyers have answered that question, although I didn't get the email yet, but I think that's going to be the answer. And certainly the ordinance indicates that. And then the other one had to do with the payroll. But I believe because if you set it up so that there are automatic payments to the school systems, and I guess there's 2 districts here, that provide them with the same amount of money they would have gotten through property taxes directly from those pilot fees, then that income tax provision doesn't kick in.
Correct.
So my questions are pretty much satisfied. I'm fully in favor of this. I think it's a great idea. I appreciate the fact that we've thought to do this, because I think it's going to help the city in the long run, recoup costs.
Because this is based upon tax abatement of the property due to the infrastructure, the income tax does not become part of this.
Right. Well, the only part that I had concerns about was that it says in the ordinance, or not in the state Ohio Revised Code, that it has to be in the ordinance stating that the payments will go directly to the school. It sounds like just sort of a technicality. But our ordinance, which by the way is very detailed,
Yes.
extremely detailed, and it does indicate that.
Correct.
So I think we're great, to go there. But if it doesn't include the provision that we're paying, or that the school systems are getting paid directly, then there is this whole thing that kicks in with the income tax, which I don't understand why it's in there, but, go figure how they construct these state laws.
The ordinance should state that the school districts will be paid in whole above and beyond for what the cost of the additional property tax would be that they would lose out on. So that's stated in the ordinance. The schools will be receiving their notices this week.
Okay.
They will have 14 days to be able to review and approve. That's included within your 30 days from the time that you receive the ordinance to the time that the council will review and approve that.
Yeah, so I think we do need to, the first thing we need to do is schedule a hearing, public hearing.
Should be in your packet, unless it was just mine. November 27th will be
Oh, okay.
the
So
hearing.
we're on board.
Yep.
Thanks, Dennis.
Any questions?
I don't-
Hearing none, what's the pleasure of the committee?
Ordinance.
Number 13 on the agenda is an ordinance approving the dissolution of the Ravenna Township JED. This is also sponsored by Community and Economic Development.
Yes, the current JED that's been in place for years, things have changed, it's about to expire, and so the attorneys and Dennis have worked together and with the township and have come to the conclusion that they're better off dissolving the current township JED contract as it stands right now, so that they could work on improving and updating to the current standards, which is a better benefit to all involved. And I'll let Dennis further speak on this.
After working with the Rootstown JED, we checked on the Ravenna City, Ravenna Township JED. And I made phone calls to the state, and the state's like, we don't have any record of this. So it has to be recorded at the state level with the Ohio Department of Development, and they had no record of it at all. So in further looking into this, the board had never met in the 10 years, and you have to at least meet once a year, and you have to have recordings, meeting minutes, and you have to have public meetings. And none of this was ever held. So basically, the Ravenna City, Ravenna Township JED was basically acting in defunct. So in talking with our lawyer, we decided it's better to dissolve the current JED and create a new JED next year under the updated ordinances and be able to get everything situated, new board, so that we can move forward with the Ravenna Township JED and be able to start getting development happening within the township itself.
During the time that it was in existence, was there any money collected?
No. No.
I have no idea. There was a couple board members that said, well, what happened to the budget? What happened to the funding? Because both the township and the city were to deposit.
Contribute to.
Contribute like $2,500. Nobody knows where that money's at. So we're thinking it never happened. It never took place.
But in a JED, there's a collection of money, isn't there, whenever a project is going? And so
Well,
there's no.
there was a collection in the beginning from the contribution of the city and the township, but we don't think that ever transpired. As for the collection of the income tax from any businesses, none of that was ever done. There was never any movement forward of that JED.
There was no businesses in the JED.
Correct.
There was never a business entered in the JED.
All right. Any other questions on this? Thanks again, Dennis. Hearing none, what's the pleasure of the committee?
Ordinance.
And number 14 on the agenda is an ordinance amending Ordinance 2018-87 to reflect House Bill 33. This is sponsored by the Finance Director, Mr. Huff.
Okay. So this one is required language that all cities, all municipalities, villages are required to pass due to House Bill 33. Some of the objectives that I've heard from Rita and everything are to standardize some of the inconsistencies from municipality to municipality throughout the state. They're trying to make it a more business-friendly state, and the local income taxes are tough to deal with sometimes, so this will take a step in that direction to do that kind of stuff. Some of the things they put in there are the age requirements, because before, in 2018, when we passed this, it was our option if we wanted to allow a tax exemption for 16 and 17-year-olds. We already have that exemption, but some cities do not, so it's kind of a mixed bag on that one. Some other stuff in there are the penalties there's stiff non-filing penalties ever since they implemented these new state requirements. It's up to $150 for a late filing penalty, which even applies if you don't owe any balance. So that's a pretty stiff penalty. I mean, after 5 months that it hits, it's $25 a month for 150 max. They're reducing that down to, I think, a $25 late filing penalty. That's still in addition to any other interest and penalties they charge, but they're at least dialing some of these penalties back on some of those things. They're also making it a little bit easier to request extensions on some of the income taxes and stuff like that. So it really, and then some net profit allocations, and also there's some new guidance on remote work that's kind of come up in the last few years. So it's nothing we have any control with. We can't change anything in it. These are all requirements of House Bill 33. Every city that has a municipal income tax will have to pass this, and they're supposed to all do it by the end of the year. So this is something that Rita gave us the sample language for, to try to make it easier for all their clients and put it all together for us. So I think Chelsea put all that stuff in the packet there.
And Rita's sample language includes every one of the changes from the House bill that need to be in there?
Everything that everything that relates to income tax, municipal income tax in House Bill 33, correct? Everything's in there.
So
I think
none of
there's other stuff.
none of the changes specifically came from us?
No,
or things that we
none of these
needed
came from us.
to
This came
improve?
directly from a download from Rita.
Okay.
Yeah. You have the same thing in you'll have it in Aurora, in Streetsboro, and Kent, and everywhere else, all the villages will have the same thing.
So are we changing anything in our code?
So these will hit our codified ordinance. Which one are we under? Do we have it in there, Chelsea? I don't know.
I mean, I don't know what all these sections are.
Well, these are the sections from the sample. We'll have to implement it into our code. I don't have the number in this sample. This is Rita's language. I'll have to look to see where it's at in our particular income tax code. It goes back to ordinance 2018-087, but I'm not sure what codified that's under.
I mean, taxation is Title IV, but there's nothing there. Well, earned income tax. I don't know what parts of our code would be affected by this.
So the state had passed in previous years, this one relates to 2018. I think they even did it before that. I thought it was like 15 or 16 when they did the original one. And basically the state standardized a lot of the municipal income tax. So we would have had to pass something at that time that would have hit our codified ordinance, but I don't know without looking it up what it's related to.
But this needs to move forward. I mean,
Yeah, but, so, I guess when we craft the ordinance, we're gonna have to put that in there to see which codified ordinance it hits. I don't know if Mr. Semino's, I don't know if he's input on this at all yet.
Okay.
All right. Any
It
other
looks like 881 would be the area of our code that you might want to start looking at. Anyway, yeah, we don't have a choice, really.
Yeah.
where we put it? Okay. Any other questions from council? What's the pleasure of the committee?
Ordinance.
Our final ordinance on the agenda tonight is ordinance approving a depository agreement with Portage Community Bank, also sponsored by Mr. Huff.
So it's a requirement to pass this kind of ordinance with the revised code. It's section 135. I don't know the specific in 135, but this is something the auditors do ask for in their Ohio compliance supplement. Portage Community Bank, they're our primary bank that we use, so we just need to have this agreement with that particular language in there. So they wanted to go back to the beginning. I talked to Portage Community Bank. They wanted to go back to the beginning of the year. Although I did see in here, for some reason I think they made an error in here. It says January 21st. I did email Don Herman over there about that. I haven't heard back from him yet. So I think that needs to say January 1st, so I'll get that cleaned up before I do that. I
Well,
just
no,
noticed that today.
it says January 21st, 2023 to January 20th.
Right. I'm not sure why he put those dates in there. I don't know where those came from, but in my conversation with him, it was January 1st. And it's supposed to go to, let's see, 23, through December 31st, 27. So, yeah, I don't know where he came up with these dates at, so I apologize for that.
If we're signing it, that it's going back to the beginning of the year,
Yeah,
are there things in there that we're signing that we did not do under the new agreement?
They had an old agreement, but there's different language in there now. They made some recent changes with the revised code, like banks can pool their collateral differently than they used to over this last year. They made some changes to the section 135. They were required to do 102% of public deposits and set those and collateralize them, but the banks all complained they didn't like that because it cost them too much money to hold all that money. They can't lend it out. So this Treasurer of State got involved and they started a program where if they submit certain documents, control things, and they can show that they're liquid and meet certain ratios like that, then they can do less than that 102%. They can do, depending on how their numbers and their financial ratios go. So it's really kind of out of our control, but the state treasurer's office really monitors those things. And then they give us reports and we're supposed to look at them and they flag us if there's some problem or something like that. So there's been some code changes, so they wanted to get that in this particular ordinance. So that's why they wanted to go back to the beginning of the year.
My question just is, if we're signing it for the auditors to be able to look at,
Yes.
are we going to have a time in the future that the auditors are going to say, you've signed this in January, but it was not done what was required until October of that year? That's the only thing that I would have a concern about. If we're saying that we've done something that we didn't, and the whole purpose is that the auditors are looking at it. That's my only question.
Yeah, we did talk, I did have those questions with Don Herman at the bank, and he talked to their president and stuff like that. They felt like this is the best way to go with it, so I just kind of trust their judgment on that. That way, it's consistent for the whole year, and when the auditors pull it, it does date that, and they said just to retroactivate it. So as long as the ordinance specifies in there, it's January 1st. And again, I'll get those dates cleaned up to make sure I want to make sure my understanding's correct too, but when I had talked to him, it was January 1st, his start date, so I'll get that figured out.
Any other questions on this item? Hearing none, what's the pleasure of the committee?
Ordinance.
And that is everything on Committee of the Whole this evening. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All right, we are adjourned, and then I will call to order the special city council meeting at 7:02 PM. Chelsea, would you read the call?
You are hereby notified that a special meeting of the Ravenna City Council has been called for Monday, October 23rd, 2023, immediately following the Committee of the Whole meeting, which begins at 6 p.m. The purpose of the meeting is to discuss and/or act upon Ordinance 2023-115 to dissolve the Ravenna Township JED.
And would you call the roll?
Mr. Kelly?
Here.
Ms. West?
Here.
Mr. Moskin?
Yes.
Ms. Michael?
Yes.
Mr. Karas?
Here.
Ms. Wood? Here. Mr. Harper?
Peter.
All right, and one item on the agenda, which is ordinance number 2023-115.
An ordinance regarding the dissolution of the Ravenna Joint Economic Development District and declaring an emergency.
And sponsored by Community and Economic Development. Anything you want to add, Ms. Wood?
There's nothing left to add.
Okay. Any questions from council on this item? Hearing none, do we have a motion to waive the 3 separate readings?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Harper?
Yes.
Mr. Moskin?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Ms. West?
Yes.
Ms. Michael?
Yes.
Mr. Karas?
Yes.
Ms. Wood?
Yes.
And a motion to adopt the emergency clause?
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Wood?
Yes.
Ms. West?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Moskin?
Yes.
Ms. Michael?
Yes.
Mr. Karas?
Yes.
Mr. Harper?
Yes.
And then a motion to pass the ordinance?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Karas?
Yes.
Ms. Wood?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Ms. West?
Yes.
Mr. Moskin?
Yes.
Ms. Michael?
Yes.
Mr. Harper?
Yes.
All right, that ordinance is adopted. That's everything on the agenda. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.
881.06.